Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother. All consumers, all consumers, all consumers, all consumers. Right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother. All consumers, all consumers, all consumers, all consumers. Right about now, about now, about now, about now, about now, about now. Right about now, boom. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now, boom. The Funk Soul Brother, right about now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother. We loved Fat Boy Slim, didn't we? For a brief time, a brief, a brief moment. He was our national bard, really. A little pig-faced British man at a piano, talking about the Funk Soul Brother, talking about praising you. Weapons of choice. Oh man, don't ask me about the floating rock. I have no fucking idea. I am not a science guy. Don't call me that. I'm not Bill Nye. I'm remarkably narrow in my understanding of the world. Like not even understanding, because obviously that's non-existent for anyone, certainly me. But rather for even like uh, competence, to engage on it. It's mostly a mystery because I can't do math, and I just sort of, as a lazy little turd, was like, you know what, this is difficult, and why should I try to do better? Yeah, didn't really see the point in doing good at anything when I was a kid. Uh, that feeling has persisted ever since and has gotten me where I am today, which is not a endorsement of me or my worldview, but rather a absolutely lacerating indictment of the world that I've emerged into, that let me float like a turd through the fucking sewers into where I am. Okay, yeah. Did I say something about Oppenheimer? Because I saw it and I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. I liked watching it. I think that it's a little weird how it's balanced because it's very short scenes up until the bomb going off, and then as soon as you get to the dueling conferences, the scenes get longer, or they feel longer anyway. And that is an accurate way to depict someone's life retrospectively. It gets longer as you get closer to the end. It stretches out, like in a singularity. And we know our boy Nolan loves his time dilation. Um, so I think the latter half it drags a little bit. Although the latter half does have my favorite scene in the movie, which is Gary Oldman's demonic hick, Harry Truman, uh, just being fully contemptuous of Oppenheimer's pretensions of moral ambiguity. And I think people have said, like, some people have interpreted that scene as, uh, Harry Truman wanting the credit for the bomb, and others are saying no. He's uh, he's indicting Oppenheimer's cowardice. And the thing is, it's they're both true. Uh, like there is the horror of the realization of this guy who had convinced himself we have to build the bomb so that people will be properly afraid of it, coming face to face with who people in charge are and how they are not people who give a shit about any of that stuff. In fact, they're people who are turned on by the prospect of mass death and who are going to be morbidly compelled to move closer and closer towards it. That's who accumulates around power. But also, like there is something more virtuous to Truman's maybe psychopathic acceptance of responsibility. I dropped the bomb. He didn't. Fucking crybaby. Because I don't see how anybody could see the movie as being as excusing Oppenheimer's character. It's just deeply, deeply critical of him as a character. He is a cipher and a coward throughout. And that's the kind of person who gets bent to, that's the kind of person whose genius and abilities get bent to the will of a uncaring and impersonal machinery. And like even a guy like Harry Truman, he is a demonic hillbilly, but he is also trapped in gears. And to me, the best part of the movie is that Nolan's limitations as a filmmaker, his literal mindedness, uh, it limits his ability to really try to get across what he is trying to emotionally, which is the reality of the machine world that the bomb was a harbinger of. A machine world that was built by a bunch of people with some variety of good intention, but that intention mixed with personal selfish interest, alchemizing into being this alien machine consciousness powered by literally the sun, a god, if you will, a new god on Earth. And the people who built it, none of them were seeking its creation. They were seeking some other horizon. But while their eyes were on that horizon, they were with their hands building something terrible. And Nolan can't really get at what he's trying to come across because, like I said, he is too literal minded. He has a few moments of artistic license, like when the gloved hand is briefly shown drowning his girlfriend, his communist girlfriend, and when he gets his panic attacks and the screen starts to shake and it gets light. But for the most part, he's stuck in his literal register, but he's gesturing towards it. He's reaching beyond his grasp, and just seeing him go for it kind of highlights the shadow shape that he's trying to gesture towards. A lot of people have compared it to Oliver Stone, and I think that is an apt comparison but he does not have the lyric heart of Oliver Stone and the willingness to be embarrassing, basically, that Stone had. The earnestness, if you will, the lack of calculation, the hot blood running through his veins. But even then, it's even the fact that even Nolan, a director as cool as Nolan, is trying to sketch this thing out makes its presence all the more resonant and dreadful when the movie ends. Like I get the purpose of the Strauss character and the Strauss turn, which is, oh, here's another guy who is motivated by a combination in his mind of best intention and self-interest, destroying Oppenheimer the same way Oppenheimer destroyed all those Japanese people, and he will in turn be destroyed. Like that is the reason that that's in there, because you have to show that this is not just one tragedy, that this is the tragedy of modern life, being brought down by your adherence, your unconscious adherence to a machine of destruction. And that destruction includes you. But it probably went too long. I think they could have probably trimmed it. The bomb was nice, and somebody says my favorite side character. You got to go with my boy David Krumholtz, as Isidore Rosen was his name. I never heard of that guy, but now he's awesome, and because Krumholtz brought it. And I think I've said this before, but I love watching Krumholtz's career because he's about my age. And I remember him when I was a kid. He was a kid. He was in like Adam's Family Values, having a hard crush on Christina Ricci, and I was like, join the club. And then we aged at the same time. And like when I was into Apatow movies, as a guy of my demographic was basically bound to be, because I'm not a rebel. I'm not outside the system. I am a product of it. I'm a fucking Pringle. He was like a knock around guy with the Apatow crew, and I'm like, hey, Krumholtz. And now though he's like aging into a real like fat classic fat guy character actor, like who can play a authority figure or a lawyer or a scientist with like a bit of humor, but also gravitas. And I compare him to like the millennial Saul Rubinek, and he is like Saul Rubinek in Buster Scruggs. So yes, love my Crumholtz. So yeah, I would say thumbs up to Oppenheimer. Probably one of his better films for sure. But also, it is what we can make right now, and that does mean this sort of middle brow, engagement with the past. Like that's what money can get you nowadays. And it's like it's one thing when that's one thing of a bunch of stuff you can get, but when it's the best thing you can get, it really does speak to a general decline in cultural production. And when I say that, that is not just me being a grumpy old man. I mean, it is looking at the material, the economic reality of uh, media has changed in fundamental ways. We still have media, and you could argue that it serves the same function it has historically, but the media that I think of when I say media is declining. But I mean, for my own sake, I'm also happy that Oppenheimer's excited because I know anything I would want to create would be about that era as well, uh, like that 20-year period when uh, the being that was birthed by the defeat of Christ at Armageddon, aka the end of World War II. Uh, at this point, like documenting its existence is sort of a bleak docudrama. If you want to get creative and artistic in any way, you really have to look backward. At least I think so. I'm not certainly not imaginative and good enough to go beyond that. So it's like everyone who's left who still wants to pay for media is going to want to hear a story about how we got here. Oh, somebody asked Upton Sinclair movie. Instead of a straight biography of Upton Sinclair, which would be very interesting because he was a fascinating guy and an example, he's like a signal figure to like tie the Puritan tradition to like modern American progressivism and socialism. Like there is a strain of American leftism that is not Marxist, really, and that was born in the communitarian impulse of like early New England, and was then nurtured by the Congregationalists, who then became Universalists, and then became by the late 19th century spiritualists, and eventually became like New Age secularists. And a guy like Upton Sinclair, another guy like Henry Wallace, like exemplify that. But Upton Sinclair is even more interesting because he embodies the woo-woo element of it too. Because like he wasn't just a socialist, but he was also big into telekinesis. He wrote a book about communicating with people mind to mind called Spirit Radio, I believe, which had a endorsement in the front by Albert Einstein. Although it's very condescending. He's basically like, well, we don't really know anything about anything, so this isn't any more ridiculous than any of the other stuff. But I think an even more interesting take on the character would be an adaptation of a great book by Chris Batchelder called U.S. I think I might have mentioned it, recommended on stream before. That would be a good movie to make. It's about a eternal Upton Sinclair who keeps getting dug up and executed by right wingers, and then then unburied, and then shot again. And he's a metaphor for the American left in general. It would be, and it gets at what a weird guy he was. He didn't just write like uh, exposés, although that was his bread and butter. He also wrote a series of sort of like espionage novels with this character Lanny Budd that were big like bestsellers when they came out, and I think he even won a Pulitzer Prize for one of them. And now are I think almost entirely out of print. But he wasn't a great. He wasn't a great writer, because that writing wasn't his first impulse. It was social change, and the book U.S. is largely about the difficulty of trying to do political art. It's interesting because you think about the epic campaign in 1936 when he ran for governor, and you see the way that the Capitol in California played hardball in that election. Like the way that the Hollywood bigwigs were literally doing fake news. They made the first like propaganda pseudo newsreels to show like hobos are coming from around the country to vote for Upton Sinclair so that they can get a free meal. And they docked their employees' pay, including all the big stars, to donate to the Republican non-entity who was just like a complete husk, Frank Merriman, and how they were able to overcome Sinclair's huge lead early on after the primaries by swamping him, and how he couldn't really respond. And you think, oh, if only he'd been a harder character, if he'd been less of a woolly-headed idealist, a goofball. But who else could embody that message at that time, realistically? Who's going to get a major party nomination in a state like California other than a celebrity who came at socialism not from the class warfare streets, but from realms of abstraction and idealism and liberal universalism? Because the former is not metabolizable by the electoral system because it denies its principle, which is a cooperative democracy as opposed to a zone of constant, nonstop class conflict. And the government, as some sort of uh, all class coalition affair that uses democratic means to pursue ends, policies, rather than the dictatorship of the bourgeois. But the book isn't about his life. It's yeah, this fictional zombie Upton Sinclair, but it's very good too. Who would play Upton Sinclair in a biopic? That's a good question. We need a big lanky guy. Honestly, the same answer, whatever answer you gave, would probably also apply to Eugene Debs biopic because they're both tall patrician looking string beans, even though uh, Upton Sinclair was like from the declining New England aristocracy, and Debs was like from the Midwestern the pioneer stock. But they both kind of look similar. God damn it, I'm on the wrong page. Where are you? Ah, oh, did I get rid of it? I think I got rid of the chat. There it is. Debs' family actually were from money, but they were relatively recent immigrants as opposed to Sinclairs, who were old time like Mayflower types. I haven't seen Barbie yet. I will though. I know I have to. I know that if you see one, you're declaring war on the gender of the other, and I don't want to declare war on ladies, so I will see it, but I have not yet. Playing around in the petroleum graveyard bequeathed to us by the nuclear age, like that creature, that techno machine powered by the sun that Oppenheimer helped give life to at the end of World War II. It took the world from us, and what it left us with is a pseudo realm where we get to play with its products, with the things that it shits out as it consumes the world. It chews through the biome and shits things out, and we get to live in a sandbox of its turds. And that's what I'm going to bring to Barbie. Like, okay, we're talking about mid century toys, which is part of the process of building the consumer heaven that the workers at the core of this new capitalist regime would be incentivized with. Like big cars with fins for the dads, and little plastic dolls for the boys and girls. Barbiturates and frock coats for the moms. Someone says that Elon Musk has had hair plugs 22 times. I believe it. I got to say, that's how you know that um, in terms of like personal charisma, you know, like in a room with of the super billionaires. I hate to say it, but it's clear that Bezos is like the alpha of that group. And one of the way you know that is that when his hair started falling out, he just shaved his head. And he was like, "Yeah, that's right. I'm a fucking ripped reptile man on HGH." Meanwhile, you got fucking Musk stapling carpet samples to his forehead. That is, you're coming from hunger. You are deeply insecure, and you're never going to be able to command a room. Bezos was from money, and he famously got $100,000 loan from his parents to start Amazon. But I don't think his parents were as well. I don't actually know if his parents were as wealthy as Elon's were. Zuckerberg, I think, was from professionals, right? His parents were like uh, college professors or lawyers or something, I believe. It'll be really interesting to watch uh, the different rich people as they start taking Ozempic, and you sort of see them get weirdly thin, like not just thin but weirdly thin, and just call it out as it's kind of spreading up and down the celebrity wheel. And God bless them. I don't begrudge them their right to do so. I don't think you should, shame people at this point for just trying to get through. That is a big political difference. It's like, to what degree is it incumbent upon you to stand athwart folly and shout stop? How incumbent is it on you to like say that like social pathologies are real? And I gotta say, not very, because all you're doing is wrapping yourself in a flag of righteousness and branding yourself as one side or another of a affective culture war that doesn't make anybody's life better either, and that it's just another brand of pathological solace seeking. Okay, somebody asked about the West African coup situation, and this is one where I don't really know that much, but I think this isn't. I would like to know the answer to this question, uh, and how people have like metabolized this. So people have pointed out that all of these generals who've been doing coups in the Sahel got training by the United States. They were part of that core of officers that got picked out, as the colonial administrators for American power in the region. But now you've got a situation where ECOWAS, which is an American cat's paw, like ECOWAS is part of the whole NATO complex of American hegemonic military force deployment, is now threatening to invade Niger, to overthrow their coup government. And these guys are apparently collaborating with Wagner Group dudes. So does this mean then that the rubric that has said historically, anytime you see a formerly some group that was formerly trained by the United States doing a coup, doing some sort of bad thing, that it is on American orders? Like the classic example of this are the Zetas in Mexico, who were special forces uh, operators from Mexico who had been intensely trained by the United States to be the point of the spear of the Mexican war on drugs. And they promptly took their talents to the Gulf Cartel and then eventually became their own cartel, noted for their extraordinary ruthlessness, much like ISIS in the post Iraq civil conflict in Syria. And in ISIS, what do you have? You have a leadership that was, in the case of the original ISIS, imprisoned in American military prisons. In the case of the ISIS in Afghanistan, uh, that is now at war with the Taliban, our old enemy. You've got guys who like were literally on American, who got American training and were on the American payroll and worked for American approved warlords. And that does look to one that one's what does look like to one from one perspective by this seamless garment of, oh, it is in the interest in any one of these uh, uh, unstable situations to control both ends of of a dynamic by having a side that you have chosen, backed, and then also having a control over like the most violent element so that it can be directed. And then its existence can be used to justify further spending and involvement. Like that all makes sense. It all tracks. But then you got these fucking guys in the Sahel who are taking their American training to South Beach. Is that part of the same plan? Or can sometimes American assets turn? Now, the way I think you could distinguish this, if you wanted to save your premise, is that the distinction between these things is that now, for the first time, guys like the generals and colonels that we train in the Sahel see an alternative to American hegemony to pursue an alliance with. And because now Wagner is standing in for Russia, and the prospect of China out there willing to spend to develop African countries, now gives these guys an incentive to turn against their former masters. Whereas in previous situations, those forces that Americans were backing had really nowhere else to go. Perhaps. I don't know. That's why I don't sit from my perch and point out psyops and fucking operations, because how the fuck do I know? All I have is a rubric to apply. But the very thing about these rubrics, heuristics, is that they guide an encounter with evidence that I'm not going to have, because I'm not going to find anything out really about what's going on anywhere. And I feel like it'd be more healthy if more people understood exactly how limited their perspective is, no matter how expansive it appears through the glamour, through the fucking lens of the internet. And when you're at that distance, all that you can see is the fucking is the image, is the thing. Like it's like if you think of a heuristic as like a target, like a crosshairs on a scope, and then you're trying to like, beat in on something, you're so fucking far away from what you're looking at and so close to the fucking lens that all you're seeing is the big cross in the middle and everything else is blurry. And then you're describing that like it's the world. So I'm happy to say I have no idea. That's just something I thought was interesting. And that's all I'm here to do is to be mildly interesting, to be a more entertaining option than staring at the wall for the people who tune it. As always, the message is do not invest in these things as part of an identity, as a way to interact with other people, as a way to guide your understanding of the life you live, as opposed to the life that you encounter in a pseudo form. And again, this is just me reminding myself to not get carried away. It does seem like the Ukrainians, that whole thing is not going well, though. Not seeing even the Ukrainian sources, the pro Ukrainian sources like the New York Times, are even kind of admitting that it's not going great. And when you consider how fervently they were in unison in insisting that Ukraine had this, for them to now be like, God damn, we tried to train these people so that they could do combined arms assaults, and now they're all getting their asses kicked, so they just went back to walking artillery up and down the fucking field and launching missiles, which are fucking finite, way cheap, way more expensive than fucking AK rounds, you motherfuckers. Come on. We're running out of fucking ammo. Although I gotta feel like for now that is still an endless well to have to dump surplus into. I do wonder if it would do if it would be to the rhetorical advantage of China maybe to. No, I guess not. I think, you know, just for someone to articulate the idea that like it's not the U.S. is defending like a free world against a some sort of subordinated authoritarian's empire. But it's also not, a campist epic third world is defeating Washington's, America can empire. It is to compete for spheres of influence, in the 19th century pre-ideological sense. But of course, you point out that led to World War One, and you're like, ah, shit. Yeah, there's really no way out of the conflict unless technology saves us. That's really it. And it feels like even more our the world that we're fed. I'm not talking about the the life we live, the life we lead, but the life that we are fed is filled with these tokens of annihilation and political annihilation and natural annihilation or technological salvation. And I think it is not the point is not to pick one or the other. The point is to accept them as both the poles generated by a giant social psyche encountering a real mental break and in going through a mental break towards or away from one or another versions of the future. Not one or another, of course, infinite, but like broad strands, like how it's going to turn out. And it's going to look different than it is now. But that process is a continuous one, and it is not made up of a final irrevocable break. It's made up of smaller breaks that are then, after they happen, assimilated into a new normal. And we continue to be suspended between those two poles, between salvation and damnation. And then we all get our individual salvation or damnation or both, one then the other. That's my theory. Damnation first, then salvation. We all get it individually, but like the social apotheosis we seek is not coming. And if that's not going to happen, because as I said, that battle was already fought and we lost, then how do we uh, gather together as many people to experience something other than that in their lives, something other than the continued march to annihilation? And that only comes if you have something else that defies the world is fed to you, the world that you are choosing to consume. Also, it's not just being force fed. People think of it in those terms. Oh, you're force feeding me this ideology. No, this is a mutual relationship. It's a nectar. It's a nepenthe. It is opium, but not just in the pathological sense of opium, but in the sense Marx used it as a soother of pain, pain that must be soothed for life to continue. Yeah, it's like, oh, aliens are just going to show up at the fucking UN and fix everything. We're going to get room temperature super colliders. And we think the accumulation means that apotheosis is near, but we are absolutely the one thing we cannot really reckon with in when we're trying to consider a moment in time is that over time, the ability to accommodate a more and more granularly populated data set where vital stuff is pushed out to make room, but where it is essentially an endless input until, of course, everything gets clogged up and then you explode. And that is what we're all in the process of doing. But those explosions, because we are deatomized and we are depoliticized, they do not that 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 explosion does not power a like a piston action the way it does in a revolutionary situation. It's just dispersed because there is no vessel to contain it. Those vessels have been destroyed. What comes next is an organic re-emergence of something that is not maybe a automobile, but is a social and biological machine capable of survival. And that will emerge like fucking roots and weeds growing up through that the cracked engine of a junked car. Yes, guild navigators. That's what we need. We need people to eat this stuff and let it poison them, but then also spew it. And you know what? What a coincidence. I think I'm just the man for the job. I get to keep doing this in any world. I'm so lucky. What are the odds that I am perfectly positioned to do the right thing? God, what a coincidence. Better not think about that too hard. All right, let's do another fun thing to do that's just fun. It's just fun, like I said. More fun than looking at your uh, more fun than looking at Twitter, although you might be doing that too. More fun than looking at Twitter and watching something else, I guess. More fun than whatever menial task you're doing while you're listening to this. And that's all, again, that I can aspire to. So we got one more pack, another pack here. We have more than one, but this is today's pack of Gulf War trading cards. We've got a military asset, the A7 Corsair. This is pretty cool looking. Corsair, of course, an old-timey way to say pirate. The Barbary Corsairs. First flown in 1965, the A7 has been phased out. Well, shit, why am I even talking about it then? After long service to both the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy. That modern version can carry more than 15,000 pounds of armament and has a reputation for delivering its weapons on target. Oh, well, that's good. For Operation Desert Storm, 20 A7s were deployed in the Persian Gulf. So this guy's out of here. Bye bye. Manufacturer LTV core. Speed 793 miles per hour. Range 943 miles. Combat. Armament 120 millimeter gun, variety of missiles including Sidewinder, Maverick, Shrike, Harm, or Bomb. One man crew. We love one of those. Yes, the Corsair. Specifically, as someone points out, always a Muslim pirate. Like I said, the Barbary Corsairs. And Muslim piracy was a good gig. It's like one of the best things that could happen to you if you like were a Catholic child in a like Calabrian village. Is that a fucking Barbary Corsair would roll up, you get abducted, you get brought onto a ship, they convert you to Islam, and if you have a little bit of gumption, if you got a little get up and go, in in only a few years you'll be in command of your own motherfucking Corsair and stacking ducats. And also, what a way to convert someone to a religion, you know? Like, sure, they probably didn't necessarily believe it when you did it to them as a child on forcefully, but after, hey, I accepted Allah and now I am fucking making it here. Of course you're gonna be convinced. Yep, that Allah, he's way better than Jesus. I was fucking mucking stalls with Jesus around. Fuck him. All right, we've got the fighting ship, the USS Ranger. The USS Ranger. Ranger. Commissioned in 1957, the USS Ranger was the first ship designed exclusively as an aircraft carrier. Uh, of the Forrestal class, she is larger than her sister carrier in the Persian Gulf, Midway, by more than 10,000 tons. Holy crap. Why were we even reading about Midway earlier? Fuck them. The Ranger, ordered to the Persian Gulf in November 1990, carries an assortment of 85 aircraft. Home port is San Diego. Displacement 79,200 tons, full load, length 1,039 feet, speed 33 knots, aircraft 85, and a crew of 6,289. It doesn't say any Marines, though, on this one. Interesting. I guess there's no law on the Ranger. There's no one to throw you in the brig if you want to get nasty. Okay, we got the intelligence files here. Rank, very important to the military. Very important to the military. Got to say, uh, it's not a great sign for communism that, or at least some of the associated assumptions around communism, as it's been practiced historically, that every time a army abolishes rank, they end up reinstituting it one way or the other. It's like when you're trying to get people killed, you really cannot abide to talk about who's going to get killed because the at that point there is full conflict between each member of the group because it's a zero-sum game of dying or not dying, and you can't have unit cohesion at that point. Military rank is the position in a chain of command through which information and orders are transmitted. For the non-naval forces, the basic positions from top down are general, colonel, major, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, corporal, and private. For the U.S. Navy, the officer positions are admiral, captain, commander, lieutenant, and ensign. Intermediate ranks exist between some of these positions. Some people say it hasn't happened that often. Well, yeah, communist revolutions are relatively rare in history. I mean, they've only been possible in the last like less than 200 years anyway. But the Bolshevik army, the Red Army, started off. The Bolshevik Revolution was in large part a soldiers' revolt among conscripted fucking peasants. And one of the things they immediately insisted on was we're not going to fucking salute anybody and take orders from some fucking aristo. And that did not last. The anarchists tried to do sort of non-hierarchical militias, and that did not last either. Yes, they were sort of forced to by the communist uh, bourgeois government, the popular front between the bourgeois and the communists. Uh, but they were allowed. They were unable to defeat that. If it works, it should work against guys who really they've hoarded the weaponry from the Soviets, but it's not that much of a conflict. Or I mean, it's not that much of a. It's not wildly out of size, and you got a big number of guys concentrated in places like Aragon and in Catalonia. But they could not. Then the big test was in May when the communists came for the socialists or the anarchists' social power. When they came for their control of infrastructure and control of military units and the control of production among the cooperatives. They could not marshal a defense. Their grassroots wanted to fight, but the leadership could not realistically imagine coordinating them. And so they saved their own asses, which leadership is always going to do. And even the anarchists ended up with leaders because you were in a fucking crisis. You were in a moment of complete extremity. And those are the moments when, historically, hierarchy is temporarily essential. Somebody says the Spanish Civil War makes you really feel like the entire project is doomed. And that is a very interesting thing to say because I think that to get Bill Clinton on it for a second, I believe that is 100% accurate as long as we agree on what the term the project is. Now, if we describe the project narrowly as the Judeo-Christian socialist vision of of transcending class society through through socialization and the application of technology. If we want to call it that project, I believe that was a 20th century project that was defeated over the course of the 21st century, starting gunfire in Sarajevo in 1914. The tide turning, the battle, the most meaningful battle, the outcome determining battle being won at the end of World War II, and then the final rout in the early 90s with the end of the Soviet Union. And the Spanish Civil War really does exemplify exactly why that project failed. And the big reason, and this is what the thesis of my Spanish Civil War series I'm writing right now is it comes down to the spatial and temporal shape of the communist movement, the however you want to define it, incorporating not a specific agenda, but a generalized idea that animated people everywhere to one degree or another, either in opposition to or in support of, polarized towards. And of course, the way they act is contradictory. Sometimes it helps that cause, sometimes it hurts it, sometimes it can do both at the same time. Judeo Christian is a made up term, but uh, the idea of a monotheistic uh, a monotheistic conception of the universe that puts the oneself defined as a member of a group at the center of it begets the intellectual lineage that is on top of the machine of capitalism that we live within. And it's been developed over the centuries through that machine's operation. And it created within it contradictions, new emergence, and counter-hegemonic notions. And socialism is the 19th century variant of that, like the peasants' wars had been of the 1500s. But you have a situation where war takes a process that is happening nationally at a given pace in every country and forces them to confront the necessity of modern state building at the same moment. Like everybody was getting to capitalism by their own speed. But then in 1914, that is no longer an option. Speed has to be maximized. Countries that are behind have to catch up fast, but they do not have developed the capacities to do that. So their social organism is destroyed by contradictions, but different contradictions in each country, creating different oppositional frameworks, incorporating different elements of the society whose encounter with capitalism is coming from a different perspective. In Spain specifically, you have people who are encountering they missed World War One, right? Spain did, because they were so far behind that they didn't even bother competing. And because due to that fact, their class war was kept at a certain manageable level, which was it was becoming unmanageable in the other countries, more developed countries of Europe. Now, Russia is, of course, even less developed than Spain, but it is more devoted to a territorial empire. Empire is crucial to its mode of production in the feudal sense, not in the modern imperial sense. And so it's slower in Spain, but you already by the 1940 by the 19 teens you have this anarchist movement emerge among the most recently dispossessed peasants of the South, the people who went from having land to not having land anymore, and did not trade land for capital, the way that city dwellers and even the priests did after the introduction of capitalism through the external invasion of France in 1808 that kickstarts the whole process, because it's war that aligns that brings a that takes a one pace of change and accelerates it to a standard pace of change in order to meet a moment of conflict. Now, Spain avoids World War One, but it creates a boom in their economy as a result that raises expectation, connects these people even more thoroughly to modern media, to social technologies. So that by the 30s roll around, you have a situation where the dispossessed peasants, who in other countries have been moved through a process of proletarianization to the point where their enmeshment in a modern state structure is taken not as a threat to their identity and the annihilation of all that is good. It is seen as sort of their natural environment. And the socialist horizon is a way to use that position to move through to a higher level of that development. But for the anarchists of the countryside and in Barcelona, uh, that that modern subjectivity was an imprisonment. It had no positive elements to it. And among, like in Catalonia, for example, you had these medium-sized textile concerns that ran the city and ran the economy. But because they were able to exert protectionism all through the 19th century, they were not forced to come together into conglomerates the way that freer trading liberal states in Europe and the United and also in North America did. So they kept these smaller family firms that were not able to be like wired into a governing uh, uh, like a bureaucratizing disciplinary structure like was built in the United States. The progressive kind of cage on these newly built uh, uh, monopolies, because they're so concentrated, they can be easily suborned. These regional these little dictators, these little family mafias running the textile firms in Barcelona refused any deal with the workers, and the state couldn't make them make a deal with the workers. The state couldn't make them ameliorate the conditions of the workers. All the state did was send civil guards to kill them and allow the owners to hire fake union members, fake syndicalists, who were essentially just criminals, to shoot them in the streets and not have any consequences. So there was no, they had not been integrated into anything. And in the countryside, the people who became the CNT base in rural Catalonia and Andalusia and Aragon were the dispossessed of the countryside who didn't even have the capacity, didn't have the uh, spoons basically to move to fucking Barcelona and get a factory job. Instead, they were idle for months and months and months in the countryside, working only seasonally for the owners of the latifundias, the vast estates there, and they were always on the very edge of uh, starvation. Uh, they ate little, and they lived in flea-ridden barracks. They wore sandals and straw hats. They were totally socially isolated because in the cities, like your professional class, they might very well like be of the former. They might be like the child of someone who came from the countryside to get a factory job. You know, they could have some sort of solidarity based on like that family experience with a worker, and they could have a political sympathy with a worker. Because even in the cities, workers, uh, they had a minimum standard of dress that they were afforded by their positions. In the countryside, the divide between the landless workers, the braceros, and everybody else, anybody with a job, was so vast that there was no solidarity. Like you might be a professional in a village, or a clerk or a paper pusher, or even a waiter, but you wear shoes, you wear a tie, and that puts you at a fundamental distance from the sandals and straw hats of the bracero. So they're totally isolated, not being integrated into capitalism with any kind of carrot, pure stick. So they're, by the time the Spanish Civil War crisis emerges, they are fundamentally resistant to the imposition of a state that Marxists, by this point, who were entering their engagement, their final conflict with capitalism at a different point, having been often factory workers for years, if not generations, often being intellectuals, often being bureaucrats and professionals, often getting benefits through their encounter with modernity, and also confident that the state apparatus can be used for good. And there is no reconciling those two perspectives because they are made by different times and places encountering capitalism at a critical moment when they're brought together by these new social technologies. I got off on a rant there, didn't I? Now, the what if that might have saved the Republic is not the anarchists getting their shit together. It's what if the fucking Western democracies had backed the Republic. They had a real chance to win if France and the UK had supported them materially, had recognized Franco's rising as illegitimate, and made solidarity, which the French Popular Front government, which was basically the same collection of Marxists and bourgeois liberals that was ruling in that got overthrown or attempted overthrown in July of '36 in Spain. They at first made moves to supply Spain with arms, but England said no because England's policy, and this is what undergirds appeasement, and which is often forgotten about when discussing appeasement. Britain's policy was some sort of uh, rapprochement with the fascist states against the Soviet Union. That's what they wanted. They wanted Hitler to settle down, take yes for an answer, and orient towards conflict with the Soviet Union. But Hitler would not take no for an answer because fascism is the death drive. It's not going to allow. It doesn't have the people in it aren't again encountering capitalism at the same time and place as those fat cats in Whitehall. Now, like guys like Anthony Eden in the foreign ministry, like they personally, some of them wanted the Republic to win. They were rooting for the Republic, but they didn't want to upset the apple cart. And this is where I'm sorry for the communists, the cosplay communists who like look at the Spanish Civil War and root and imagine they're on one side. They look at it and they're like, "You dumb anarchists! You didn't realize that you needed to get your shit together. If we're gonna win this thing, we have to be coordinated, and we have to like accept that this is that these are the state is the implement of this battle that we're having, that there is no other zone of conflict worth having, which I think is what was being slowly realized during that period, but too late because of the temporal spatial distinctions. But the communists were kidding themselves too. They were kidding themselves that there was uh, a basic feeling among the bourgeois states that fascism had to be defeated. That they saw fascism as the same threat that communists did, and that is not the case. People say liberals always prefer fascists, and it's like that's it's if that's true, it is simply because liberals are not at the end scared for themselves under a fascist regime. And when I say that, I don't mean all liberals. I mean liberals where it counts. Liberals in positions of power. They always believe that will not come for them because they believe that politics, at the end of the day, is kind of a game. And I have my team, you have your team. I'm rooting for my guys, you're rooting for your guys. But at the end of every day, we just get back and we divide our spoils for the day, the profits that we've extracted. And the thing is, they're right to think that because fascism does have the same capitalist political economy powering it. Liberals will see communism, though, as their annihilation. So no long-term deal can be made. And yes, eventually there was a point where the where England was like, all right, like we told you how much you can have, and you're still going. So you are now you are as much as we want to orient against the Soviets, you are a greater threat right now to our interests. You are coming for you are trying to overturn a global economic and political order that we're at the top of. You are not trying. I know you're just trying to get your snoot at the table of the empires, but it's too late. We already divided all this shit. You cannot do this. Flag on the play. And there was this beautiful Popular Front moment when you could be a communist and a good Democrat in the United States, for example, and it was amazing, and people wanted it to last forever. But slowly but surely, that the capitalist part of that coalition was working behind the back of their allies to secure a post-war world where the defeated quote unquote Nazis and the defeated quote unquote fascists were incorporated into a new front to dominate the former colonial world and prevent it from socializing its economy. And the fucking the Spanish communists they found out too late when Madrid fell that they were just waiting for it to end. And by that point, everybody just wanted the war to just wind down because they all accepted war was going to come, but they did not want it to happen where they were not anticipating it. And Spain was always somebody else's baby by that point, and they just wanted it to wind down before they found a real like uh, action to orient around. And it's because everybody was caught in the Kobayashi Maru. It was an unwinnable war based on the way that the tiles were flipped, you know? But to get way back to the question that somebody asked about, does that mean that the project is over? Again, this is the project I'm describing, but we should not conflate that project with the human project, with the project of consciousness coming into awareness and encounter with itself. That project can never be defeated. That project is what lit the souls of everyone who was pushed in the right direction during those holy years. And it is what will start to burn again within all of us. And is. And yes, like Oppenheimer is a good example of this. Oppenheimer thought he was saving the world from the Nazis, but he was handing over the world to the Nazis in the form of the capitalist gargoyle class that controlled fascist and democratic governments, and which at that time had the communists along for the ride with, but the communists had a faith in their basic humanity and to the general arc of history that turned out to be misplaced. because it was self-motivated. And I could argue, people get mad, but I could argue that that wrong turn was inevitable as the moment that the Soviet Union became the materialized vessel of the communist horizon. We think of it as the thing that allowed for possibilities, and it did, but it also foreclosed other possibilities. And since we are now in the backwash, I think we can say, without controversy, or it shouldn't be, that at some point this was lost, and that was when. What was the guy supposed to do, though? I know, that's the thing. It's nobody's fault. Everyone's acting according to what they think is the terrain that they surround themselves with. We move through history, and only in the stillness, only in moments of stillness does like the greater shape illuminate us and allow us to feel it, uh, and allows things to emerge, to erupt, to break through a sort of a glacial determinism. Yeah, FDR's body basically shut down because it could no longer handle the contradictions that he was trying to embody. He was holding him within himself this entire coalition that was just breaking apart as the conflict was reaching its critical mass. Okay, we beat the Soviets, we beat the Japanese. Now, what are we going to do about the economies of these countries? How are they going to be organized? Where is power going to reside? That is the fatal conflict. And he was just standing athwart it until his head exploded. And with like Lincoln was in the same position, and his head also exploded. And Kennedy, obviously, I would argue a absolutely pale imitation of those two people, and an evidence of just how like character is leached out of power over time in capitalism. But similarly, like athwart a barrel in terms of democratic governance of a secret Nazi state. And all their heads exploded. Like their inability to manage the contradictions. Because remember, if they did manage the contradictions, they wouldn't be dead one way or the other. FDR's health would have been better. He wouldn't have had a FDR. I think I've said this before, but I believe his blood pressure taken before he went to Warm Springs, Arkansas, or Georgia, where he died, was like something like 350 over like 150. It was comically high. Someone's pointed it out before. I said this before. But yeah, that's just him fucking a kettle. Like one way or another, the pressure destroying him. And with Lincoln and Kennedy, the pressure evinced in this marshaling of hostility to him. And this is the important part. For both of them, reckless behavior. Because Abraham Lincoln, I would argue, going to the fucking cinema, sorry, going to the theater, Abraham Lincoln going to the theater with one drunk sitting on a stool as the Confederacy was writhing and dying on the battlefield, was asking for it. JFK refusing to put the bubble top on the fucking uh, Lincoln, remember, it was a Lincoln he was driving, and just being like, now, it's a beautiful day in Dallas. Let's get some fucking wind in our hair. At the very moment that I'm threatening to smash, that I'm threatening to, if you believe in conspiracy stuff, the very moment that he's threatening to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces, or the very moment he's planning like the end of the Cold War, which I don't believe at all. I think that is fantasy, daddy worship. That's like if he's going to be that important a character, he has to be that great a character. And it's like, no, that is you wanting everything to be a storybook. He can be kind of a kind of a himbo who had like basically his heart in the right place, who got in fucking way over his head because he didn't realize the country he was in charge of. He doesn't have to be the guy who embodied an alternative to the fucking Cold War. But he has to if your ego requires it to be the case. But even if you don't think that, everyone, half the country hated Kennedy by that point because of the Civil Rights Act that was in the offing and that he hadn't even passed yet. There were newspapers that had wanted for treason ads posted by militias, the Minutemen. Adlai Stevenson had been spit on and hit at a hotel in Dallas. As you know, uh, Oliver Stone, by the way, has um, Donald Sutherland say all this stuff in his big speech in JFK to just highlight how in danger JFK was. But at no point does anyone say, well, how the hell didn't he think to be a little more careful and not just go along, be led by his nose, and then insist on leaving the bubble top off? I can't handle this contradiction. My head will explode. This is also me narrating my own hypochondria about the idea that I'm also going to have like a stroke and my head's going to cave in. And I think if it does happen, I don't. It's probably neuroses largely, but it's probably based on some physiological thing, you know. But it could be years in the future. It could be tomorrow. I don't know. But either way, I'll think of it in those terms of, we're all eventually done in by our inability to face the contradictions of our lives because we see a resolution of those contradictions as the annihilation of us. And we are so very addicted to us. All right, let's get through this quickly. Syria. Our buddy is in Syria. Syria has participated in the Arab-Israeli wars of 18. I think I had this one again too. It says that it adopted a radical stance in the Middle East of supporting international terrorism. And then it says, despite these unfriendly positions towards the West, Syria is a member of the coalition forces, which really does say no hard feelings. Geographic area 71,498 square miles. Population 12.6 million. Language Arabic. Predominant religion Islam Sunni. Although there's a lot of there's some Alawites in there, and it's caused some problems. Capital Damascus. Government type republic under a left-wing military regime. Ah, remember they are the Arab Ba'ath Socialist Party. Head of government, good old President Haifa al-Assad, a real pimp player who kept it all together his whole life. But the thing about that kind of personal union, unless you're giving birth to something different and sacrificing yourself in the attempt, if you hold on to it too long, you create a brittle inheritance that will crumble in the hands of your descendants, which of course is the process that we're in right now, which is why all of our media is about failed children failing to live up to their parents. It's an understanding that that is why we cannot handle the crisis we're in, because even if we could use the machine we have to a positive purpose, the people who could do it have been completely edited out of power over time by the persistence of a aristocracy that clothes itself in merit, but which is as decadent and failed as any previous uh, uh, strictly what's the word? Uh, strictly inherited. Yeah, a strictly inherited aristocracy, because you get like one, maybe two generations of mobility and merit under liberalism, and then it freezes. And they said that thing about good men, strong men, all that bullshit. It's like that framing is wrong because it uh, it its um, explanatory power is nil. You're not explaining anything with that cycle. You're just narrating a social transformation. What is driving it at every level? And it is the establishment, the perpetuation, and then the collapse of a underlying political economy that is inherently riven by social contradiction, and that over time accumulates greater and greater social contradiction. One of the things that makes crisis inevitable, though, is that crisis appears to a decadent leadership. At the very moment that leadership is most important and most potentially helpful, again, this is within a system. This is within a leadership class. At that very moment, those traits that allowed for the establishment of the thing are now detrimental or absent. All right, Bulgaria. Oh my God, what do the Bulgars have to do with anything? The Bulgars. People's Republic of Bulgaria. I guess it hadn't fallen yet here. Located on the Black Sea in the eastern section of the Balkan Peninsula, Bulgaria is currently in a transitional state of government. Yeah, I bet, if they're still calling it the People's Republic. It is of historic significance for being a country of shared influence from Greece, Asia, the Near East, and Western Europe. After 500 years as part of the Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria achieved independence in 1908. It joined the United Nations in 1955. For the Operation Desert Storm, Bulgaria offered troops. That's interesting. It's saying they offered troops, not that they were accepted. They were like, hey, you want some troops? And we're like, we're good. We don't need Bulgarian troops. They're only going to get in the way. We got to feed them. Geographic area 44,823 square miles. Population 9 million. Languages Bulgarian, Turkish, and Greek. Dominant religions mainly atheistic or non religious. Damn you, commies. Eastern Orthodoxy, some Islam, and Roman Catholicism. Capital Sofia. Government type in transition. It's complicated. They should really have had it's complicated on here. Head of government President Andrei Lukyanov. Whenever I think of Bulgaria, I think that there is a Byzantine emperor called Basil the Bulgar Slayer. He knew what he liked, and it was slaying fucking Bulgars. We've got an armor and artillery weapon, the M109 DSWS howitzer. This guy looks cool. I love a howitzer, big thick barrel. It's a self-propelled howitzer designed to add maximum mobility to the 155 millimeter howitzer cannon and to provide artillery support for armored and mechanized infantry units in the field. In Operation Desert Storm, the M109 was part of both the coalition and Iraqi arsenals. How did that happen again? Jesus, we keep doing that. They keep getting a hold of our weapons. They must be sneaking into Fort Bragg and hotwiring it. Manufacturer Cadillac, Chrysler, BMW. Speed 35 miles per hour. Range 13.6 miles. Armament 155 millimeter cannon, 112.7 millimeter or 7.62 millimeter machine gun. Crew of 6. Damn, this is made by 3 different fucking companies. Really spreading the lucre around. Military skill. Heroes don't do drugs. Oh, here we go. Heroes don't do drugs, huh? Well, we're glad somebody does, or how are you going to pay for half of your Contra guys in fucking Nicaragua or the AUC in Colombia? None of the U.S. Armed Forces tolerates drug use. That's a good question. Have they relaxed that yet? Because I got to feel like they're going to have to at least let you smoke weed if they want anybody to join the army now. Drugs impair the ability to think and move. Well, I don't want that. Just like in civilian life, a soldier's success and survival depend on clear thoughts and careful actions. Good soldiers and good civilians never take chances with illegal drugs. Don't do it. Legal drugs only. Yes, you live in a society where everything of value is a soporific, where all ways to like self-create and self-define are commodified and neutralized. So the only journey you can take is towards the soothing of pain. Don't do drugs. They really get you by the balls. Personnel, U.S. military, U.S. Naval Academy. The U.S. Naval Academy. To enter the academy, an applicant must be 22 years old, 17 to 22 years, U.S. citizen, 17 to 22 years old, unmarried, not pregnant, and have no legal support obligations. Of good moral character, scholastically, medically, and physically fit, and nominated by an official source. Midshipmen receive approximately $500 a month, plus tuition, room, board, and medical and dental care. Graduates earn a Bachelor of Science degree and a commission as a Navy ensign or a Marine second lieutenant. So these are the junior officers of the Navy. Lieutenant would be the rank in the ground forces. Founded in 1845 in Annapolis, Maryland. Good old Annapolis. People think that that's not the capital, but they are wrong. It is. Also, by the way, heroes don't do drugs. Somebody tell that to Fort Bragg. Every other fucking operator there is either doing heroic amounts of cocaine, selling it, or both. When they're not trafficking human beings. David the Admiral Robinson. He was very unhappy with Steve Nash coming out against the Iraq War because he was a good military man. Government, the Kuwait system. Did we do the Kuwait system? We did Kuwait, but I don't know if we did the Kuwait system. Let's just go there. They got an appointed prime minister, a council of ministers, legislative authority shared by the emir and a 50-member national assembly. Democratically elected legislature is unique among the Gulf nations, but the emir suspended the assembly on July 3rd, 1986. Oops. Oh well. Kuwait enjoys a relatively free press, but freedom is highly restricted for non-Kuwaiti nationals. Type nominal constitutional monarchy. I like that. It's like theoretically there is not a constitutional. We have a constitution, but if the vibe isn't right, the emir can just say never mind. National holiday, February 25th. Head of state, Emir Jaber Al Ahmad Al Sabah. Political parties prohibited. Suffrage, native born and naturalized males aged 21 and older. And the last card of the day, Afghanistan. Oh boy. Oh boy. You guys, you have no idea what's coming. I mean, you have had a lot of stuff, but now you're going to get, you just hold on. We got a whole lot more in store for you. You thought you were getting rid of the Russians? Well, guess what? The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979 to put down revolts against communist rule. A civil war fought. That's not really, kind of, I guess. That's a little. A civil war followed in which the government and the Soviets controlled the cities while the guerrilla forces or Mujahideen ruled the countryside. Since the Soviet withdrawal in 1989, communist and Mujahideen factions continue to fight. The guerrilla force sent 500 Mujahideen fighters to help in Operation Desert Storm. What? I didn't know that. What were they doing? I guess, it's like, hey, pay it forward. You helped us kick out the Russians. We'll help you kick out the Saudis. Uh, Wait a minute. What's this? Oh, no. What? Oh, fuck. We're being blown up and invaded for 20 years. And then we'll leave. And then America will leave, having built nothing and having only brought death. It's astounding. Geographical area 250,000 square miles. Population 15.9 million. Languages Pashto, Dari, and Persian. Predominant religion Islam, good old Sunni Islam. Although there are a very persecuted Shia minority. Honestly, could see a long-term war with Iran over that and other issues. Capital in Kabul. Government type, communist regime supported by Soviet forces. So this is not, it has not yet happened yet. They have not yet kicked out the Russians. Head of government, President Mohammad Najibullah. So there you go. Tune in next week tune in to Blowback Season 4 if you want to know more about what happened to Afghanistan till 91 and then what happens afterwards. We love our brave Mujahideen fighters, don't we, folks? We love them. I mean, yes, the communist regime was the best government Afghanistan ever had, that's for sure. But the Soviet invasion is still a mistake. They really fucked themselves there. Yeah, the Afghanistan invasion came at a point for the Soviet Union when they needed to like look inward. And then instead they decided to go to Afghanistan. And then they ended up having to do the looking inward way later and on a worse footing and with a much shakier economy. And and the whole thing fucking collapsed. That's why if it feels like you should be going to war, you need to stop and ask yourself, what is pushing this? Like what below the causus belli? What below the strategy? What in the our political economy is pushing us in this direction? And the answer is there's a crisis somewhere within our social body that is not being addressed. And then we're like, well, we'll go to war instead of dealing with it. As a last uh, as a last effort. Like somebody said to me when I was sort of criticizing Putin for invading Ukraine, he said, "Well, if you're saying that Putin thought like in the long run that's the end of Russia if we don't invade, then didn't he have to?" And I'll say, "Well, no, he could have tried to do communism." And you can laugh at that and say, "Oh, that's stupid," but it's like, I'm sorry, like the form of the states that we currently have is not sacred. The polities that we have now are not sacred instruments. They're wrecks, they are shells. But hey, who knows? Maybe this time it worked. Maybe this invasion is gonna knock over the American Leviathan. We'll see. And of course, the dream a lot of Western leftists have is that what I'm describing is actually what's happening in Russia or in China right now. Like China got to a crisis point or recognized crisis signs and is internally moving away from them using the structures of the party state that they were bequeathed from this 20th century struggle that may not be communist in any respect, but which still allow themselves to be animated by like collaborative human will in a way that the other governments of the world just can't do anymore, if they ever could. And that is a whether that's true or not is a question that I, from my distance, can't answer. I don't think anybody else who was really invested in one or the other answer being true can either. Honestly, we'll see what happens. It's not a big deal. We'll all meet each other in a field, a place beyond right and wrong. And I'll meet you there. Peace.